we'll do like the clapping for like the official start, but there's been some really solid gems that people drop, and I don't have clips, and I'm just trying to get better like short clips and shit like that. So we'll figure it out. It's all an experiment, but I thought it was really timely to talk to you for a couple of reasons. Well, first, the one that I'm editing today is with Nerd, who like,
hell yeah,
there's no bigger fans of you than me and Nerd. So it's just like, okay, it's like a great follow on. Lounge, obviously I just participated. So I feel like we have some good shit to talk about there. I want to hear more about experiments learning. I want you to pill me on seemore now that I have like a podcast and a consulting business. Like I feel like over the past couple of months, I've become a pretty good target.
100%.
Yeah. So we've been talking about a lot of things, but it just felt like, I don't know, it felt very like tactile right now. I was like, it's like a good moment between like Lounge and me launching some other stuff for us to talk, and then like channels popping off. And I don't know, I'm not hoping that we disagree, but whenever anyone's like, I love Cameron, I'm like, me too. He's one of the few guys that like I've managed to sit there and have like genuine disagreements with and still like think extremely highly of. It's like, there's people I think highly of, and like we just kind of like get along, right? But you sit in this sort of different class, and I was like, I think that's gonna make a pretty fucking good episode. But before we dig into all that shit, which I have notes, first things first, is there anything you don't want to talk about or avoid? It's usually like I've got something on the horizon, like don't make me like don't pull that out of me. I'm not ready to announce it yet stuff.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I have anything that like I'm not super into. Anything that I'm like, I mean, like I'm not afraid to be like, hey, you know, that's coming, or you know, we'll come on into a future one. Obviously, like same as kind of like normal human rules. Like I don't expect any kind of like gotcha, but like if there is, I've reserved a right to be like, all right, cool, man, fuck off. But
yeah, I think that that's the exact type of clip that I would like to put in the trailer. Yeah, but I don't expect any gotchas either. So that's good to know. I assume we want to plug seemore. I assume we want to plug Lounge. Is there anything that I'm missing? Because I try to keep track of all my homie stuff. But what are you working on right now?
I mean, like I'm kind of in a spot where I'm not really actually like explicitly trying to plug anything. I just like talking to my smart friends, and I like talking about Farcaster, and I like thinking about where the internet is going to go, and hopefully we can shape it a little bit. But like, you know, if it like I'm not gonna like pause for like an act break and then like plug a thing. It's just not. It's not how I authentically feel about like what's happening right now. And so to the extent that I like can just like act my life that way, I do.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, this is mostly okay. So then two sort of notes on the way I like frame the pod before we hop into stuff. The first one is this is like to extend my reach and prove like my thing, but it's also very much for you to extend your reach. And I think it's very like Farcaster native to like not plug your own shit.
Yeah.
Right. Like not pump your own bags, which is like dope. I love that, like about the culture. But I see my role as like the growthy, like strategy.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
It's like the whole point of this is for me to show that I can get you to plug your shit, right? Like,
yeah.
So like people have like felt better about it. They're like, okay, yeah, it's for Dewufi to show that like he has friends and contacts in the space that are doing cool shit, and then I tune into vibe check. There's like clear CTAs, like in a good way of like, oh, Cam is cool, I should go check that out. So like
that's fair. Super fair.
Yeah, frame any plugging like that. And then the last thing is like, don't trip about like, you know, trying to like come up with like a narrative or like go in a specific direction. That's my job. If you like go off on tangents and not interesting or like whatever it is, like don't worry, I'll reel it in if it hasn't happened yet, but just in case. But more so like especially when I was talking like Les and Les was the biggest one for sure. He just like I like kind of threw a lot at him. He's like, I'm trying to answer everything. I'm like, just like whatever's interesting, man. Just focus on what you think. But I think you'll probably have some very little problem with that. Is that all good?
Yeah, man. Works for me.
Hell yeah. Love the coffee. So we will clap in. It's vibe check with Dewufi and Cameron. And I don't know. Feels like a long time coming for me personally. Like I feel like I should have had it on earlier, but everyone's busy, and that's how things go. But as we're talking before we got this started, that it feels very, I call it like kata right now, because I just participated in Lounge, which is, from my view, a resounding success. At least
I appreciate that.
I feel like I got a lot out of it. I want to hear more about you. I've got some stuff going on personally with like some consulting stuff and like this podcast, obviously. So I've like sort of it's become less like theoretically like what's cool about seemore, which has like been most of our past conversations, and now it's very like I want to get seemore pilled. But the beginning of these is always I don't want to walk into this assuming everyone's in my cozy corner. I'm trying to like proliferate the good shit. Who are you, Cam? What are you working on? How'd you get to Farcaster? Some basics would be great.
I'm Cameron. I'm building seemore.tv, which today looks like automated creator pages, but is ultimately the last funnel a creator is ever going to need. We'll obviously talk more about that on the pod. I got into Farcaster by sneaking into it, which I'm happy to talk about too. And have basically like once I snuck in, just like hid for a little bit and then realized no one was looking for me and just started hanging out and talking to people and participating where it made sense.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, definitely unpack that because I think you meant you like technically snuck in, but there's just like, but there's this emotional resonance, like Les mentioned on the pod that he felt like an outsider. I was like, right, like literally opposite of this point. But there is this sort of, especially amongst the folks earlier than myself, there's like this feeling of like, am I supposed to be here? Right? Like it's almost too nice. Like, does everyone know each other? And I think that's actually persisted when I talk to new people coming into the space, despite how big it is, despite it being permissionless. I think maybe just because it's cozy, but like tell me tactically what happened as like as a sneaker.
Yeah. So back in 2022, which was I think they actually launched Farcaster in late 2021, if I have my like timeline correct. But in 2022, another caster named Alex Kwan at Ace of Pearl fame, he tweeted a link on Twitter to sign up for Farcaster when he wasn't supposed to. Like period, full stop. Dan asked him to take this link down after he posted it. But I've been following Alex because he had this project, I think called like Tiny Rooms. And it was basically like pixel art, kind of like a space that you can decorate. And so I thought it was cool. So I followed him. He tweeted this thing out. I was like, oh, crypto, social, all these things that I was like trying to understand better at the time. I was like, that looks cool. Let me sign up. And then in the like 10 minutes that it was up, I saw it, I signed up, and then it took it down. As far as I know, never tweeted it out again. And so like, that was we talk about like Farcaster and its interactions with users. Like at that time, they didn't really have anything that they had intentionally done other than not make the sign up not public to stop people from signing up. So like this was if a bot got hold of it, they would have made the first 10,000 FIDs. But I got it. I think I was like FID 617, and so like sub 1,000 Farcasters like got in, and then just kind of like, okay, no one's gonna kick me off, and then like over the next few months started posting and interacting, and kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, no, I mean, would have been a great psyop. I don't suspect it was, but I think that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think there's always these interesting stories when people come on, especially because they come from such varied backgrounds. And actually, you got a pretty varied one as well. I want to cover that. I want to go in a little bit further to the background just a bit, because the one thing that I really started to dig into, especially as I do more of these podcast episodes, like people like love to give authenticity lip service, but like, you know what I mean? It's like, dude, you got to be authentic. And then like they go out and get some fucking consultant, as someone who's like trying to consult, like some like, some like whitewashed, like sanitized, like this is your authentic brand image. Make sure you post like this. And it's like, I think yourself and like Polymarket have proven that like it's always been trash, but like you could get away with it because of advertising games and like zeitgeist in Web 2, and I just don't think it tracks anymore. So where like what were you before you got here? Because I think it does. I think that information bleeds into sort of a lot of like what you've been up to, honestly.
Well, I'm doing the podcast thing where I want to respond with, that's an interesting question, because like it was like explicitly framed as like, who were you before this? Yeah. And like, that's a question I have no fucking clue about, to be completely honest. Like I kind of frame it as like, some periods of my life, I think about the life that I'm living as I'm living it a lot more than others. Other periods I just fucking like do and execute. And like, that version of me is informing how I think about myself when it's the time to think about myself more, but like not explicitly happening in the moment. But like what I did before hanging out on Farcaster and kind of startup land and crypto land was I was in the Army. So I went to college, went to the Virginia Military Institute. I'd actually grown up in Cherokee County, Georgia, if anyone's familiar with that. It's not like super in the woods, but like I kind of classify it as like the borderlands between Atlanta and like the rest of Georgia. And anybody that's like been to the Kennesaw, Marietta area in Georgia, like understands what I mean by that, where like you have Atlanta, which is like kind of a city. Like it's not like a New York kind of a city, but it has its own kind of like city energy. And then like once you drive 45 minutes outside of Atlanta, like you're in the country. Like
it's
even
the fucking woods out there, man. Like,
yeah. And so like I kind of straddled the like, okay, some weekends I would, go backpacking, just fucking with the woodsy, high school kids that I was friends with. And then at other times I'd go to Atlanta and enjoy like a hardcore show or something like that. And so grew up in Atlanta, went to the Virginia Military Institute for my college, studied physics and math, commissioned into the Army as an infantry dude. So I did that for 4 years, deployed to Kuwait and Afghanistan with my platoon back in 2016-17. And then I taught leadership at the Army's Officer Candidate School before getting out. Transitioned into getting my MBA, which is actually really fortunate because I thought I was going to go do like math research or something, but it turns out no one wants to hire you to do math if you haven't done math for a while. And so like the sequencing of getting out of the military is you have to request to get out in advance, usually further ahead than like is reasonable for a private sector career switch kind of thing. So I like asked to get out in 2017, and then I was allowed to get out in 2018. And so like I basically asked to get out, started to try to find jobs in the private sector. And then I realized that like all of my plans were just not going to work because I didn't understand how the world worked. And then I kind of scrambled to be like, oh shit, what do veterans do when they get out of the military? And it turns out a lot of them go get like their MBA or something like that, because that's like an off ramp. And that off ramp got me into kind of like tech, into startups, into just kind of like understanding the private sector in general. And then from there, after I graduated, co-founded an e-commerce software startup, sold that in late 2021. And then that's kind of the transition to me finding Farcaster.
So yeah, I mean, I find that a lot of people who have like that grit, like you could point to some pretty specific places where they learn it. And I think obviously the military was quite a bit, but like the phrase that you use is like, was it all my plans weren't going to work?
Yeah,
like that framing is like how I think most people should be approaching crypto. Like all of it, right? Like I'm always yelling, like no one fucking has PMF. Like Bitcoin doesn't have PMF. Like none of these narratives are sticky to the point of like what we're used to. The majority of us, at least I'm like elder millennial, right? Like growing up, like sure, I remember a little bit about like Netscape launching and like, oh shit, there's pictures on the internet now.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's like I've got some of that in my head, but for the
I got cool math games just like locked in.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And like the stuff like it burns, it churns, it moves. But I think like the deep understanding that you don't understand stuff is really important for working these like nascent energies, right? So on that tip of like at least me not understanding anything, and then and bringing my friends on who I also want to accuse of not understanding anything. I just participated in Lounge, and I was telling you, I thought it was resounding success. Well, let me tell you why I thought it was a success from like my personal perspective, and then I want to get yours afterwards. Because one, I had no fucking idea. I was like, what is this thing? Like I saw it popping off. Like I was having fun reading it, but I didn't know what participation would mean.
Right.
So you pinged me. It was about channels, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna get out of this, but I like Farcastery stuff. I like what Cam does. Let's see what happens. And I was surprised of a couple of things. One, the group chat was super fucking cozy. Like just the homies hanging out, talking about channels, which is like, I guess I don't know where else I would have found that level of activity with that many people of high quality. Right? There needs to be some sort of spark there, some sort of like almost mission, right? I learned a shitload. And then like bluntly, like my follower count grew quite a bit, and like obviously some stuff, but just like I think the cross sharing, and there's definitely some people that I didn't know in there. So I followed some new great people that it was great for discovery, it was great for knowledge, and it was great for reach. So from that perspective, for me, it didn't require a lot of effort versus the amount that I got out of it. But tell me a little bit about Lounge, the genesis, and like what's been going on with it. Like what have you been learning from it too? Because you're the one running the experiment.
Yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know, Lounge, I call it kind of like an asynchronous group chat. And it's an experiment on top of Farcaster channels. And so I wrote about Farcaster channels back when they were like creating them for the first time in even the fully non-decentralized way. And I really like channels because they're kind of a confluence of a couple of different things on the internet, all of which are really useful. And I don't think has been attempted in its like in the form that channels on Farcaster appear in. But like quickly, it's like a subreddit plus a Telegram channel plus a Discord to a degree where like you are solving some of the problems of these private mechanisms, i.e. like distribution. Like you can't have great distribution of inherently private groups because the content that the group is making doesn't get shared with the rest of the world. The flip side is like when all that matters is distribution on something like a TikTok, you get like potentially mega virality, but you like lose the depth of content and when you require a user to bring some context to a piece of content, you have a lot more opportunity to create something like rich and rewarding and kind of like, I don't know, you call it a 3 standard deviation piece of content where like you can enjoy it so much more because you have some additional context that doesn't require like the slop to be accessible to like the lowest common denominator. Some really broadly accessible content isn't slop, but a lot of it is. And like, I mean, there's a reason why cat videos are like the primitive of like new places on the internet because like everybody likes cute animals for the most part. And so like Lounge was a place where like, hey, channels like explicitly mean there's a place with people with higher context that you can do stuff in. And I was hoping that plus Farcaster being like a higher context place to begin with and a higher like nuanced tolerable place to begin with, you might be able to have like a more interesting post than in other places. The other thing that is really, really important about channels and Lounge is that like there's not that interesting stuff happening in a lot of channels because it's like work to make good content. And like Dan hits on this all the time, but like making good stuff on the internet is hard and most people aren't going to do it because they're not going to spend the time to like get in the reps of making not good content to like learn how to make good stuff. And so I thought there was maybe room for a place where people that I think could make interesting content can be like shaped or like guided a little bit so that the things that they know that are interesting get showcased, which is like the core of most like really good content is like there's an earned secret or something that other people aren't aware of that like you can pull out of somebody. And so like Lounge is the place where I just get to ask my really smart friends like 5, 10, 15 things and see what happens. And it has gotten, you know, a good amount of traction, which is exciting. It's really hard to tell what's like actually working on Farcaster though, but that's like a whole separate thing.
It is, but I do want to get into it. We will get there because there's a lot of really great stuff to unpack in there. I was rewatching the last episode on like our little like rewatch episodes that I do on GM Farcaster on Wednesdays. And he was like, it was funny to watch like duality in him because like he first got to Farcaster, he was like, oh, like if I don't cast good shit, people don't interact with it. And that was just a foreign like concept to him. It's always kind of like, do you have followers and like they'll interact with it, right? But like it didn't feel that way. Like people were actually like, fairly picky. And I think the majority of like active users still are. But then he also had cast a lot of bad shit because that's how you're going to cast good shit. He goes, I would put out a bunch of trash out there first. He's like, oh man, this guy just like is using this like his public like journal for like note taking, and like that wasn't interesting to people. So it's funny to see how those things play out. I think on the channels bit, I want to dig into like there's a lot of channels that aren't interesting right now. No, because I'm grappling, let's say, with the ideas of like Farcaster's growing. It's still the highest signal place, bar none, in my opinion, for crypto content. And I really don't think it's close. I've tried to continuously get back into the Twitter content. It's still too farmable. It's still too gameable. Links not working is still like fucking up my feed. You know what I mean? Like, or like the nerfing, right? Like all that shit just like really screws up with my ability to sort of like surface signal, which is a lot of what I'm doing on social media when I'm not increasing my own reach. Dan's trying some experiments.
He's straight up just taking the top memes on Twitter that he can find every day and posting them to Farcaster. Like that's 100% what's happening, which is like what I would probably do in his situation too. Like honestly, I'm surprised that we haven't seen larger scale automation of the best memes from Twitter to Farcaster from that team. Maybe we have, and we just like haven't clocked into it. But like the like rest of the internet needs the like simple narratives. Not saying that the rest of the internet is dumber, but like most people engage with the internet in like a very unnuanced way. And that's like fine, right? Like the like Hawktua being the story that anybody, or the meme that anybody can say and get a couple likes for free for a few days. Like those types of thing are what like that movement is what makes the internet like feel like it's alive and feel like it's participatory for the majority of people. That it's not really participatory. You just get to like hop on and draft for a little bit with these like big meme trends. But like, yeah, no, I think that stuff doesn't originate on Farcaster, and unless it starts to originate on Farcaster, like it doesn't have like a super long shelf life, I think.
So then what's the future here? Or, or potential futures or your ideal future? Let's talk about the future a little bit of channels. Like questions that come to top of mind that might be interesting. Don't have to answer all of them, whatever's interesting. But like, does channels fix this? Does this need to be fixed? Is it just different? Right? Like, does this force a more nuanced take? I'm really fucking bearish on alt clients that look anything like Twitter, Webcast, whatever. And that's not shade on anyone in particular. I just think it's crazy to compete with Merkle on features. I'm big on using the graph for other experiences, but yeah, tell me about the future of channels and how that interacts with what you're just talking about. Sort of like, let's call it what it is, mid-curve internet usage.
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually think the last thing that you were getting onto about like competing with Merkle is probably something that's worth just sitting on for a second. Like I am not a Silicon Valley native. I do not have parents that were like FANG engineers. Like I do not have any inside baseball other than my 2 years at a global institution like that is very much part of that pipeline. And that kind of like surprised me, right? Like I showed up to Harvard Business School and I was just like, oh, cool. I was losing at a game I didn't know I was playing. Cool. That's just like my new baseline for life.
Yeah.
In some ways. And so like, I don't know anything more than other people in general about Farcaster and engineers and building stuff. But like my kind of obsession over the past few years is like startups and how to be good at startups and how to make them work. And, kind of had like one, what I would call like partial success. And then one, I'm going to say not success yet, but like working my ass off to try and make it with seemore. But like, I don't think it's crazy to say that the Merkle team is one of the best engineering teams in maybe the history of technology that now has effectively an unlimited budget to try what they want to do. Like, just from a raw horsepower, drive, and focus perspective from the leadership team down to the engineers. Because like there's been great engineers in a spot like before, and there's going to be again. There's been like great visionary people in one spot. Like this, what are they up to now? Like 14, 15 like world-class engineers on their fucking team?
Yeah, 15 is the number I use, but I have no idea what it actually is.
Yeah, and so like it's crazy to think that anything that's in their like what their self-constrained ballpark of relevant things to do, it's crazy to think you're going to beat them. Like maybe you could have a year and a half ago with like your hyper team of SEAL Team 6 engineers, but like after they get $150 million more, no way, not a chance. And like money isn't everything, but it's like a lot of things.
It's a lot of, it's like by definition, it's a lot of fucking things. It's the whole point of money is it's a lot of things.
Yeah. And so like from that perspective, I think anything that is like a passing interest from the Warpcast team. I'm not saying is like a straight non-starter, but it's like a very gives me a big old feeling as somebody that like, like doesn't have unlimited resources, time, or ability to like make something and hopefully carve out a slice of the economy that like I can run a company in. So like that's just kind of like a scary thing. More power to people that want to try to do that. I think best case you're building an SMB, which is not a bad thing at all, but like a small to medium sized business can be ran by like a team of 3, 4, 5 to like a healthy scale. And like, I don't know. I just don't see how anybody that like starts getting some traction that way that is like like not completely orthogonal to Warpcast. Like, of course they should like integrate that feature as soon as they let somebody else build out some traction for it.
Yeah. So let's dig into this. This is I never know where the conversation is going to go. I didn't say this one before, but I want to dig into this because there was this epic, in my mind, epic. Sometimes the really small moments are epic to me. Usually they are. Yeah. It's just the way my brain works. This is what I would consider an epic exchange between Dan and David Furlong about the pay integration, which is
David's real.
David's a real one. I'm talking to him about a bunch of stuff. He's a really sharp dude. I like him a lot. Yep. And he was like, it was something about, Merkle, basically taking the tech, but it is technically like an integration. I know Snaver's Payflow is on there and there's one more like, if you want to do other tokens. And Dan was like, we're giving them distribution rights, smiley face. And like, whenever Dan gets a smiley face, I always like picture it almost like, it's not like an all happy smiles, right? It's almost this is bait smile, like 95% of the time, which is great for engagement. And I always take Dan's casts under the guise of understanding that like he understands what public persona is, right? Like this is what that is. But then David sort of bit back with distribution with a sprinkle of existential dread, and I just felt like that was so on the money because you never know. Like it would be trivial for Merkle to integrate other tokens if they felt like it or whatever it is. So there's this weird balance of like you want to be good enough that you can get integrated, but you don't want to be so good that you're sort of like what edible is sort of the way I would describe it. Go ahead.
There's like a really interesting, I mean, like this isn't new in terms of like tech models, but like bottoms up disruption is like very much chasing things that aren't worth in this case like Warpcast's time to chase. Mm-hmm. But the problem is like if you are chasing these things that aren't small enough, you probably or that aren't big enough for them to care about, but in your head like, oh, but the TAM is ultimately this, which is my justification for working on it. Like that sucks because as soon as it starts showing that, oh, that TAM is actually on the arc of this growth path, then it does become a big enough opportunity for like a Merkle, whatever platform you're really trying to like disrupt. Like it makes sense for them to chase after it. And so like none of this is said with any maliciousness on my part. It's like super reasonable. But it's really, really hard for me until we have actual examples of it working for a long period of time. Like I don't see why a Merkle growth arc doesn't look like a Microsoft late 90s, like desktop as the OS as the distribution, like boot on the neck, or the Apple App Store iPhone boot on the neck. Like I don't see that. And like, that's maybe aggressive language for a team that is still like in their very, very early days that have mostly done what they have said in terms of like public good. But like the tape plays out the way that it plays out. And until it shifts from like the don't be evil to a can't be evil somehow, like I'm just, eyes wide open.
For sure. And like, we're all here because like, we're here because they've done pretty well, honestly, right? Like they have been pretty upfront. They have, I don't think they've garnered much malicious feeling from the community because they've been so upfront and sort of honest about it. I think there's a couple of instances here and there, you're going to step on people's toes, but no major backlashes. And to get this far, and I think they've completed what I call their villain arc post FarCon.
No major backlash from people that could really be annoying, I think.
I think that's true, but also there's still this incentive structure, which I think is one of the superpowers of like, you wouldn't have had fucking anything if we didn't do this first. So like, you don't get to be that mad either, right? Like that's part of it. It's like, okay, like you built this business, it's small, you had some features, but like if 100% of your distribution was through Warpcast, like not even Farcast, like let's call it what it is, Warpcast, 95% of the time, 95% of the distribution, right? It's like
100%.
You owe something too, right? And not that you should have to pay everything that you owe, or that there's no downsides to that. But like, I think there is some sort of reasonableness within people. It's like, okay, like, yeah, sure, maybe some toes were stepped on, but at the same time, even if it's not altruistic, it's like just from a pure practicality perspective. Yeah. Whatever I do next is going to get distribution on Farcaster too. Yep. So you kind of like either you're in the game or you're not, right?
Yeah, like I think like in conjunction with that, because like I don't disagree with any of it, and like anything that I say is like very much in the vein of like I'm making a huge bet on Farcaster as like a platform and a future platform, and just kind of like the vibes of it is where I want to be on the internet. It's also super clear that like Farcaster has entered the level or like the like ring of success where no matter what they do, it can't be the thing that everybody wants. And so like most of the complaints, I would say as of permissionless, but like really the last 6 months, like they're never going to get 100% approval rating. And in fact, if they're like targeting that, I think it's super misguided. And I don't think that they are, right? Like there's a thoughtful element of them of like intentionally stirring the pot when they like need to, or they want to like pump a feature release. And then there's like just the part of, hey, many of the people that are upset about things are either coming in from like a no context background or like a specific that like they've already decided how they want the world to be. And that's explicitly not what Warpcast, at least like maybe the Farcaster protocol might be, but like Warpcast has repeatedly and publicly stated that they are not going to be. And so this isn't going to feel like the utopia that some people may have been sold, because it is an explicitly opinionated thing that does things that they think will ultimately let it survive, as opposed to following some ideology.
Yeah, and selling a utopia, or I love studying cults. I say this a lot, but like selling a utopia or selling Nirvana is like, I wouldn't say it's a fool's errand, but it's a specific type of sale, right? So like when you interact with those people who believe in utopia and like go off, anyone can believe in whatever they want. I think there's some great people out there who believe in utopias that have done some great things for the world. But reality is reality. And like, if you're going to choose not to operate in reality, then like, I don't know, you should be giving product feedback is my like that's sort of my take stance on it.
Yeah, like I mean, it's super clear. Like Dan doesn't listen to most of the replies, right? Like, because first of all, who knows what's astroturfed anymore? Just like in general. And I'm not like a post-truther kind of dude. I just like from repeated reps of like trying to earnestly deal with the internet, like no, just a lot of it is legitimately in the realm of like a straight up nation state actor who's trying to do something, some just person that you probably wouldn't give the time of day, because like you can very clearly tell from meeting them IRL that you wouldn't really value their opinion, but you like don't have that, like there's a layer of like plausible, oh, this might be real in any like post that you come across, unless you explicitly don't take that. Or third, it could be like a literal child that has a computer and like, you know, not saying that children can't have good opinions, but like the amount of energy I've seen creators waste in the comment section on like TikTok because some literal 12-year-old is saying that, you know, like their protest song is stupid or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's the internet is random and a lot of the time signalless, and it's really, really hard to like do useful things while using the internet as your signal loop.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's different types of signal, right? There's like the outright signal, but there's like, even if it's like 500 bots in the responses or cyborgs or whatever the fuck it is, like that's its own type of signal, right? It's this is getting astroturfed, obviously. Like this must be important to someone who runs a bot network, right? So there's always those types of things. But but yeah, I'm with you. There's also the cultural country divide, right? Because I forgot what it was, but I was reading that like there's an obscene number of like I think it's Indonesians on TikTok, right? And I forget exactly why, but like people forget they're like, oh, it's Asia, like it's Muslim, right? And it's like like they're getting very angry at like the half naked women, and it's like, okay, but like that wasn't your market anyways, or maybe it is secretly, like whatever the case is, right? But looking for that signal is super important. The astroturfing thing is interesting. I don't know. It's to be expected at this point, right? Like it's there's no other way that it was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I found the debate on Farcaster about like what's a bot account, what's not, to be really interesting. Like, it's honestly kind of like a litmus test of like, what's your opinion about the internet in general, right? And like, what's your experience, to be completely honest? Because like, if you didn't grow up with an internet that wasn't botted to shit, or at least was botted in a very different way, then I don't know, you just kind of like experience the internet, I think, a little bit differently. Because like a lot of the things that I see, and I'm like, okay, this is just like this. Like I saw in the early days of like IRC or like parts of 4chan or like bodybuilding.com, like forums. And so like I'll call them like proto behaviors of like trolling and like mimetically remixing things, and like what is an earnest reply versus a troll reply is very much informed from like growing up as a weird internet kid, playing online games, and like doing all of that from a place of like me being kind of the bad actor on the internet. Cause like as a kid, you just do dumb shit, right? Like I used to play Halo 1 online with some buddies, and we would pretend we were colorblind in the chat so that we would just team kill our own team and they wouldn't ban us. Like dumb shit like that. Yeah. And so like, I don't know. I come to the internet from this, hey, it's by default adversarial, because like you don't have any of this like skin in the game that you do when somebody can punch you in the face in real life. Yeah. And like everything on Farcaster, like once there were actual real world incentives for like status and money, of course the replies are going to get botted to shit. Of course there's some sort of arbitrage that an actor that it will spin up a server to put a bot, or like just be themselves, you know, because they think it's going to be of some value to them. Like, of course that was going to happen in my head, but like, that doesn't feel like that was the default assumption for a lot of people. And I think that like, that's informing a lot of the responses to like Merkel's mechanisms to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's also been interesting watching like Jeff Goldberg's like graphs and stuff like that. Cause at any given point, there's like one or two of like my people that I hold in high regard, like friends in my DCs, like, yo, is your feed shit? I'm like these days, actually, like I took some time to unfollow a bunch of people, not because I didn't like them, but just because I was seeing the sort of like direction they were headed. And like, I don't hold anything against them for, you know, being very actively degen tipping, or for like, you know, they've got products launching that they're forcing you to like and recast and follow channels. I'm like, I get it. It's distribution. I'm growth. I don't hold anything against you, but I see what you're attracting. I see the type of people in your comments, and to be honest, just kind of fucking up my feed. And I decided sort of like not to participate. I just took a step away, and things have been a lot better for me. But I get that not everyone can just like, I don't know, be fun employed like myself and step away from shit because they feel like it. And I know some people are making like, you know, they're making their rent off this stuff right now, especially in other countries. Like this is like, you know, it's tough to think about, but like I'm not going to hate on anyone for that.
I think that it's like really easy to moralize this when like the reality is like everyone has different lives, and there's a bunch of stuff going on that like isn't like either directly relevant or like isn't actually replicatable for you or any other individual.
Yeah, I will say this though. I'm taking an active stance against people who are like, oh, like my feed is bad, it's Dan's fault. Or like, you know what I mean? Or like, oh, Warpcast is dead, like it's all tipping and botting now. I'm like, dude, I see your wallet. Like talking like, you know what I mean? Like no skin in the game. Like there's skin in the game now automatically because we're on financial rails. Like whether you talk about losing at games that you didn't know you were playing, right? It's like, I don't know why my feed's all tipping. It's all bots. I'm like, you're chasing the last 50 meme coins that came out talking about like mother and like what other crazy shit's going on. Like if that's what you want to do, feel free. But I don't really, I think it's disingenuous to blame other people. And this is like a ton of people, but I do see it happening. And I'm like, you're in control here. It's permissionless. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I think that they're like there's a really, I don't know if I'll call it good, but there's a really memorable Tyler the Creator tweet about cyberbullying, and he's just like, basically like, how is cyberbullying real? Just like put your phone down and walk away. and and like part of me is sympathetic to that. But like a part of it is like, we do have legit scientists that are working together to try and like capture your attention. Like there's a global arms race to manipulate you to keep looking at whatever you're looking at on your magic rectangle. And like, even if the Merkle team doesn't do it, or the Seymour team doesn't explicitly do the worst things, like they're still informed by 20 plus years, plus another 100 years of like actual advertising, like study. And so like, I'm sympathetic to like people caught in the black hole, whirlpool of algorithmic feeds, but they also, like, as you point out, like they show you what you are kind of manifesting.
Yeah,
which is like also an interesting, like, I think there's a rabbit hole to pull. I didn't plan on saying this, but like the rise of people genuinely believing they can manifest things in conjunction with how algorithmic feeds basically are the manifestation of what we're trying to do. I think that there's like an interesting screenshot essay or blog, like podcast conversation to have there. But like, I think I find myself like trying to just turn off the internet in my brain the more that I like do the internet, I don't know, professionally, as I guess what I would call it. And so like, I'm finding I do more full dark periods where like my phone isn't even in the same room as me, just because like I hyper concentrate so much on like my Warpcast feed or like the Twitter feed to see what is happening there or whatever, or TikTok. And the fact that like you get into such a groove and being locked in on like kind of studying the content makes it so that it's like really, really easy to do that at the expense of everything else. And so like, in the theme of people complaining about their feeds or whatever, like, honestly, I just don't have time to even think about those people anymore. So it's like a default, hey, we're not interacting on the internet for the most part anymore, because like there are things that I want to do on the internet. I know I can't do everything, and I certainly don't want to like commiserate real time forever, because that's a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I just so you know, my numerology means that I am a manifesting generator. So if you have any, we can dig into that at another time.
I'll call you for tips.
Yeah, call me for tips on manifestation. But you said a couple of magic words in there, and I tried to keep these like relatively tight, just to be honestly to be cognizant of like the watcher's time. Although I do sort of want to do like a 3 or 4 hour podcast one day, just like for fun. And see what happens. But in this iteration, we're trying to keep it pretty tight. I want to know a lot more about Seemore, because I am sort of becoming a creator. I think a lot of folks are in my position. We got an episode with I Speak Nerd coming out. He is of that vein, let's call it. There's more and more people who are leaning into this, like, even if they have a full-time job, or if they don't, or they're trying to get out of it, whatever it is, right? Like, I think there's some pretty serious like happiness for the world unlocks about like being in control of your own time, being able to take a dark period, right? Because like there's people out there who like monetarily cannot take a dark period. Of course. They're running support 20 hours a day for Salesforce and whatever it may be, right? So I think there's some really good stuff here, but I haven't talked to you about Seemore in a bit. Let's take the last few minutes, if that's cool, to tell me what it is, what's going on with it, and like sort of like, I don't know, like, not to be weird, but like pitch me. Like, yeah. So I'm in like a weird spot with Seemore in general, because like on the one hand, you have this like ship early, ship often, ship before you're comfortable kind of like ethos in building shit. But the reality is, with some like products, it has to be a level of like quality before it's like actually useful to a person. And so most early stage startups like do get 10 of their friends to use their product, mostly out of like the founder being like, hey, please use my product. I know it sucks. And so like, some products like have the fortune of like doing something actually better than the original thing at first. But most things get there eventually, as opposed to like born fully formed, right? Like
this isn't an electrical generator that we're making for the first time. Like this is like no joke. How do we improve a thing that has been around for a decade, which is like a link in bio page. And so with seemore, I initially really thought that the approach vector for people was going to be like, hey, this isn't a link in bio. This is its own separate thing where like you send people here. It has all your content. It's always up to date, blah, blah, blah. And that's the foundation for kind of like doing a bunch of new things with your content that you have it in this one spot. It became super apparent that like, that's too much nuance. And I think as a growth person, you'll appreciate that. Like there's too much nuance in explaining why you're different than every existing link in bio thing that exists out there. To the point that like you don't really have a license for anybody's attention until you do the thing that already exists out there and do it so much better than these other things that it's like no question why you would use this thing. But link in bio is like arguably the worst place to build a company because it is super saturated. It's effectively commodity software, which is just like a wall of buttons. So like JavaScript on a freaking page somehow. And the people that you're selling it to, i.e. creators, don't really think about it in the way that I think they need to be thinking about it, which is as part of how they get people on the internet to do what they want them to do. And so for a creator, that's typically growing subscribers or earning more money. And like those are the things that creators generally care about. And so like we've basically took the last like month or so, because we tried a lot of different ways of selling like, hey, like all your content in one spot, zero effort, like this just works kind of thing. And when I'm pitching it, it kind of works because like I can talk to people and I can answer the questions as I'm doing it. But when they just interact with it, it is very hard to like understand that this is like a different thing than a link in bio in general.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of been like quiet for 6 weeks, posting teasers, but we're basically like revamping how this thing works. Right now, link in bio is basically like a wall of links. A creator will like make it. At some point, they'll put in all the things that they can think of. It's 15 links. And then like within a week, it's already out of date because they posted new content or they started a new channel or whatever. And so like from there, we realize that we can take all of this content that people have. We can effectively make what I'm calling like a creator client for that person, like basically a mini app on a web page that I think now can be the fastest way to go from 0 to 100 on a new creator that you just found. And all of this is in pursuit of making this thing, which I think is the keystone for creators' digital funnels, which is this link in bio, which is the one place all of your socials can point back to. But just making it like inherently smarter, prettier, and more useful to people that are discovering you for the first time. And then from there, it's basically like anything one of our users wants us to do with this kind of page that fits in the vision of helping creators make more money or grow subscribers is probably something that is either already in our roadmap or is going to go in our roadmap. But it's like we are attacking this link in bio keystone step in every creator's like funnel, trying to make that as useful and as intelligent and as smart and flexible as possible and as rich as possible. And then from there, trying to make all of the revenue sources that creators typically have, because there's like 7 or 8 that most creators typically follow over the course of their creator career because they all make money in the same way. And then just adding those like one at a time and suggesting them at the right time for the creator. So it becomes much more of like an OS for a creator that is like centered around this keystone part of their funnel, as opposed to like, yeah, it's my link in bio. I set it up 6 months ago and I haven't updated it since, like, which is the revealed behavior for creators.
Dude, this is super exciting because as you're talking, it's funny, like, I was checking it. I mean, I was trying to stay up to date, but, before we hop on, I always make sure to give it another peek. And like, it felt almost like icebreaker adjacent when I was looking at it. And like, that didn't feel quite right for me as someone who's like, icebreaker's like my professional network. And like, this is like supposed to be slightly different. Like, I'm not trying to
have to.
Well, I'm not trying to overtly generate revenue from my professional network. Right? That stands as like something different. But like this creator side of me is like, this didn't feel like it fit quite right. And then as you were talking, I was thinking about actually YB's TOC, which I don't know if you participated in that. It feels like that is actually much closer to what he needs. But like 2, like what I would need. And 3, like I don't have his wherewithal and vision to build my own app. But like we know push notifications are fucking king. Being able to like set up alerts and things like that for like whether like paragraph or like podcast, you want to check out the new vibe check episode or whatever it is. Being able to connect directly with an audience like that makes a ton of sense, and really only because of the Farcaster social graph long term, in my opinion. Yeah. At least open social graphs, right? Because like it's really hard to get someone to install an app, especially if like all you're doing is publishing on Substack anyways. But people are getting like much more prolific. Discovery is like actually fucking possible, which is like impossible today if you're a Twitch streamer, right? Like Tyson ad or like a Mr. Beast or something like that. Like I don't need an app. Like I just need more products to sell, because there's no way to actually lift out that super valuable chunk, which the walled gardens guard, because they know it's the most valuable part, right? It's that graph of people that are following you and stuff. But now this incentive actually turns that whole thing on its head, right? Like now you can do more interesting things in an app that's even creator specific.
Yeah, like I think that there's like a couple different important threads in there. Like one of the first one being, the more people like a creator, the more that they want to exist in a space that it feels like for them and their fandom. Like that's something that you kind of see in a lot of different places that like apps are like trending towards. Like YouTube is trying to generate like more stuff within the profile with like posts from the creator in the community. Like TikTok is trying to increase video length because they know that most of their creators like really don't have a relationship with the fan. The fan has a relationship to the bit, not to the creator. Yeah. And so like for anybody that wants to do this long term, you have to have some sort of group of people that like genuinely like you and want to interact with you and like other stuff related to you. And the closest thing we have to those spaces right now are basically like micro paywalled gardens, like the Patreons of the world. And I don't think that that's like the right shape for most creators either. Like the distribution is already hard. Putting your best stuff behind payment gates is like inherently self-limiting. And in a hits driven internet, it's like even more, painful to do that. And so like, I think that there needs to be a space that isn't just like, it is honestly kind of like channels where you have aspects of it that are like explicitly distributive, but also aspects of it where you can retreat into, we'll call it a cozy corner, but like, I really think you can call it a community corner where just like you would log in the mid 2000s to like the Doctor Who forums or like a little bit later than that, like the Tumblr pages for these different fandoms. Like, I don't think fandom is explicitly what we're going for, but there's not a place that isn't, I'll call it like, absolutely fucking destroyed by ads on the internet. Like anywhere where there's like a little bit of a fandom, you're just getting like banner added to shit right now. And like, I think that there is a different place that you can have where like you have good content, you have creators basically not doing most of the admin work of organizing it into a coherent narrative. But if they do want to do the admin work of being like, hey, somebody gets to my seemore page, I know that I have a series of, YouTube shorts that are like pretty funny to watch in this specific order. Like having that little mini client where you can like be like, hey, this is the first kind of like vein of content a new person wants to see or like generally wants to see from me. Like we'll put that like right up front or above the fold. Like conversely, like most creators don't really think about that. Like they, if they're really good at bits, they're going to do the bits. But like what I can do is like, I know a user's coming from LinkedIn. I know a user's coming from YouTube or these other places. I can change around how the like client is going to render for that person because I know that they're like a short form video enjoyer or something like that, or more likely to be that. And so a client that is already doing the world-class like A/B testing, like funnel testing that like tech startups are doing, I think it's just kind of a no-brainer with individual creators content. Like if you just empower the creators to increase their conversion rates on the things that they're already trying to do or suggest things that like would benefit them. Like I think it's a lot more likely we build an actual middle class in the creator economy where like, yeah, you can get 30, 40, 50,000 followers on your Sailing Knot videos and earn a sustainable living, or at least like only have to work 10 hours a week instead of the like 40 that they're doing now or 60 or whatever.
Dude, 100%. We're running up on time, but like there's so much in there. I think like I know Art and Kristen have an app out right now. So like demand is starting to spiral for these type of things. There's also all these primitives, like, you know, Matt's got events that like you can sort of plug and play into this as things grow, depending on like the type of community, which I think is super interesting. I will push back a little bit. I don't think it's like channels. I think it is channels. Like I think this is like the evolution of where channels will probably head. This, and you know,
I think so too.
Competition and things, but this makes a ton of sense that it's like it's the organization that matters, and like it's kind of cool on Warpcast, but it's really fucking cool outside of Warpcast. Because it's one thing to be able to lift out a graph. It's another thing to lift out a graph with context, right? And that's never been able to be done before. So that's super fucking exciting.
Yeah. If things go right with seemore, like we're going to be the best position to bring every creator's content on chain, because we'll just be able to port everything from their YouTube account onto Farcaster.
Yeah, and I think projects like Opacity are going to like make that easier to be, just like suck that data out, and it's super straightforward. I think honestly, this sort of reminds me of like, you remember Zynga, like in the world of like there were good ideas, but like just wasn't like there enough. Like there's no portability there was no discovery there. It was very cozy, and there were communities, but it was no distribution, no one monetized or anything. But it has some of that like, I don't know, that shit was fun, man. Like fun remains like underrated to me, especially in Web3, was like everyone's just like running infrastructure and shit. Like this shit sounds fun. So super fucking bullish on it, man. Obviously I'll stay tuned. Everyone else should stay tuned.
Hell yeah.
See more stuff. I'll be signing up 100% to test this stuff out, because this sounds super exciting to me. And in the last note, just like ads start to proliferate, and it's rhyming a little bit more than I want it to. Currently is my honest take. Like I think we should have like pinned frames that like can generate revenue. Like I think that's a good idea, especially for people like Nerd who like, you know, they're trying to like make tabletop a full-time thing. And I think it deserves to be a full-time thing. But what you're talking about opens up more what I would say like podcast style advertising, right? Where you have these like sort of deeper, closer relationships where like there is truly like mutual like positive sum games that can get paid out of it. Because like I could imagine a bunch of companies that in the future hopefully would want to be a part of like the Woofs like vibe check like thing that I'm doing, and like I'd love to highlight them, and I'd love even more to get paid for it. And that seems to line up a lot better than like cramming banners into Warpcast without their permission, which, you know, it's fine, it's permissionless. Like I don't think anyone's mad about it, but I've done some analysis on like what's happening there, and like I don't know, it started off as very impressive to me, and I'm sort of falling out of favor with it. So,
I mean, I think, and my last startup was in kind of like old to new media, right? Like media publishers. I think, I just think most people in ads are really bad at understanding how ads work and if they work. And I think like marketers not demanding attribution in some way, shape, or form, or at least trying to track it, informs a lot of like the really, I don't know, bullshitty ad stuff that happens out there. The other big, so like I think broadly, like many marketers are much more vibes marketers than like data driven, which isn't inherently bad, but like basically means a lot of money is wasted, period, full stop, just like not being useful, productive capital. But the flip side of it is the shittiest actors in any advertising ecosystem always have the most margin to play with.
Yes, we talked about this.
Yeah. And so like if you have the most margin to play with because you're like selling sawdust, which is like 100% margin because you're not actually paying for anything useful, basically, like, of course, those ads are going to be everywhere because they just have the most money to spend with it. And so like I kind of see those two things being broadly how most like banner ad ecosystems play out. The third thing, which I just think is like really undercounted as like a real and meaningful force impacting like mostly young people, but like people in general, the idea of creator product fit is so much more important than anybody realizes, because we have never like, you can kind of say that companies have an incentive to not sell shitty things, but the fact that like a company is multiple layers removed from a human being feeling something when things go bad, for the most part, like the CMO might get stressed, but like the person working at a company that just sold garbage, like unless it's like actively harmful and they're getting, you know, attacked by their family for it or whatever, like it's so much more it's like Casey Neistat camera videos are, I think, the best videos on the internet for like deciding if you want to buy a new thing, because the dude has been touching cameras longer than most people have been, one, making content, but two, like been alive. And like the fact that he can speak to it from an informed, like expert perspective and make it entertaining and make it valuable. Like it's the combination of all of the things that make him a uniquely like impressive creator, oriented around an authentic recommendation about a thing.
Yeah.
And like, there's nobody on Farcaster doing that right now because the incentive doesn't exist for that to happen right now. Like the payoff for them to put in the work to share their expert opinion for the most part doesn't play out. And so like I think what we will see for things that want to be like enduring successes, they focus basically on creator product fit for advertising. And like, that's maybe the most important thing that they do for their go-to-market. Or it's started, like the company explicitly is started by that creator / entrepreneur.
But like, that's what you do with like Mr. Beast snacks and stuff like that, right? Like, that's the other way to do it. But these better incentive models, because there's, back to one of our original, skin in the game now, right? Like hardcore skin in the game. You're never going to see me recommending anything publicly on this podcast that I don't like to use and like love myself. I think like Huberman Momentous is like another great partnership that just like makes perfect sense, right? Like this dude, like no matter what you think about him and like whether you like him or not, like the guy's clearly science driven. And he's not going to put his name on something that he hasn't like, vetted out. He's just not that type of person. You can get that vibe. And I think we'll only see more of that for sure. Fuck flat tummy teas, honestly, like bullshit. I kind of like, I like to end on bombshells. And like, that when you frame that, like most margin is going to be the most prolific with advertising thing for me. That was really a huge unlock for me when you first told it. So I'm glad more people are going to get to hear it, because I think that's big key differences about crypto is that like, when you start tying identity to shit, it's harder. It's harder to do, at least from like a creator's perspective. And like, I think you're going to see a lot of washout, and people are going to ruin their reputations. And like, that's the normal arc of history. Right. But it does make me like, it's really, I guess what I'll close it with this. It's really shitty now for obvious reasons, but for those same obvious reasons, I think it's going to get much, much better, because the serious creators, the people who authentically want to connect with their audience, the people who are creating great products that want to connect with those audiences, there's no way in my mind that they could possibly not win out over the long term. Everyone else will just get burned more and more. Is sort of my take there. Yeah,
I can see that. Like, I think there's a version of it that like, I mean, I think everything in crypto is just like a hyper, like a high velocity version of the thing that it would have been without crypto. And so like the scammers are going to scam more, because like, if we're talking about this infinite margin like world, well, like that's what a shitcoin is it is an infinite margin good, because there, for most of it, there's nothing underneath it other than like trying to temporarily price attention, which means that they can spend as much as they can get away with on advertising the thing in this like self-referential mimetic spiral, up, and then back down. But the piece of like, once we make this like world legible, like the Zach XBTs of the world are doing, like, it's really, really interesting, because like, on the one hand, we do have in Cassie's kind of like framing this zero privacy dystopia. And then, which like, I actually think is super fair. But on the other hand, like, we might have a chance to like, frankly, have a better model than this like FTC standoff that we have with creators, where they're supposed to tweet #ad in any of the ads, but like no one really meaningfully does. And so like, having a way to make kind of the incentive structures more legible via like public ledgers, I think is really, really powerful. I think it's always a continuum, because like, obviously if you want to scam people, you just pay cash off chain still, but like, there are parts of it that you can't do that with, or you can't easily do that with, which is like often good enough for the situation, which is I'm okay with. Like,
no, I think privacy is great. I think broadly speaking, most people don't really care. I think you should be able to have privacy if you want it. But if you're going to come to me and tell me all my transactions are private, you should totally buy my DJT. I should have the option to know that you are probably a fucking scammer. I don't know. That's the way.
I mean,
it would be a good discussion between us if we didn't. I was secretly hoping we disagree a little bit on something before the end of the talk.
Well, so maybe I don't know if you agree with this, but like we were talking about people that believe in utopia at the beginning of the call, and like I kind of equate the problem with believing in a utopia isn't the fact that you believe that things can be good, it's that you believe that things can stay the same. And so like I kind of view like what people are really saying when they're like, I believe in utopia, or I believe in a dystopia, or whatever like their end state belief is, like they're really saying that they believe in stasis, which like I don't really believe is a thing for any meaningful amount of time, which is like existentially really hard to believe, because like when you're feeling good, you're like, oh wow, cool, this is temporary and fleeting. But like the flip also works when you're like having a slow morning like I had today, or like a shitty day or whatever. Like you're like, oh, this is also a temporary state of the world. And so like I think a lot of things haven't meaningfully changed in that respect. We just can either get to the end state faster and then change it just as fast.
I think that was I'm on board 100%. There's always that weird caveat that maybe the change will change if we go second derivative, but I think that's a fucking bombshell. I'm fully on board with it. This was, man, such a pleasure to have you on, dude.
Likewise,
really.
man.
It's funny that you said it had a slow morning, because I was like, if anyone's going to come with the heat on a Monday morning, it's only going to be Cam. Any parting CTAs or words or thoughts? Otherwise, yeah, this has been perfect for me, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, follow /seemore if you haven't yet. We'll be dropping a lot of things in there, including soon some interesting content from our content creators. Also keep an eye out on season 3 of Lounge. We've done startup or software founders, we've done channel owners, and the next one is going to be design oriented. Tag me if you think someone who's good at design should be part of the discussion. I'm going to be chasing the usual suspects and hopefully some unusual ones as well to get them to hang out for a week or so. The quick learning from Lounge, because we never really talked about that, is like everyone's busy, everybody gets bored. Tightening the shot group of like, hey, we're going to do this for 7 days and we're going to do it really, really well for 7 days is the next experiment I'm going to try, because like if you have too many people, everyone, like tragedy of the commons, like everybody gets away with not posting if they want to, which is fine. Like I didn't have any hard rules about it, but it's like really hard to manage and keep the momentum if you do stuff for too long. And so I'll plug a nice, tight, focused Lounge about design soon. And then I'll plug Vibe Check with Woof. This is a great time. If you're thinking about going on it and he asks you, you should come on.
Fuck yeah, man. Thanks, brother. I'll catch you on Farcaster, man.
See you, man. Have a good one.